What happens when a music legend sits down for what should be a friendly chat and instead faces an ambush that turns into one of the most shocking exits in daytime television history? In just 41 seconds, a single accusatory question would shatter the comfortable atmosphere and spark a confrontation so intense that security would be called to escort someone off the set. Cliff Richard walked onto the Loose Women set that afternoon with a warm smile, waving to the studio audience as they applauded his arrival. He was there to talk about his new album, his upcoming tour, and decades of entertaining fans around the world. The legendary singer settled into a seat on the famous panel desk, surrounded by the hosts, Denise Welch, Janet Street Porter, Colleen Nolan, and Kay Adams. Everything seemed perfectly normal. The lights were bright, the audience was excited, and Cliff looked relaxed and ready for what he thought would be a pleasant conversation. Denise Welch started things off, in her usual style, leaning forward with a big grin. "Cliff, lovely to have you here. You look fantastic, I have to say." Cliff smiled back graciously. "Thank you, Denise. It's wonderful to be here with you all." The first few minutes rolled along smoothly. They talked about his career, his favorite songs to perform, and memories from his early days in the music industry. Cliff was charming and engaging, telling stories that had the audience laughing and clapping. "Tell us about your first number one," Colleen Nolan asked with genuine interest. Cliff's face lit up. "Oh, that was Living Doll. Such a special moment. I remember hearing it on the radio for the first time and thinking, is that really me? It was like a dream." The audience applauded warmly. Janet Street Porter asked him about his fitness routine next. "You look incredible, Cliff. What's your secret?" He laughed. "Well, I try to stay active. Tennis is my passion. I play as often as I can. And I think staying positive helps. Surrounding yourself with good people, doing work you love that keeps you young at heart." Kay Adams smiled. "You've had such an amazing career, decades of hits. What keeps you motivated?" "The fans," Cliff said without hesitation. "Honestly, it's the connection with people. When I'm on stage and I see people singing along, people who've been listening to my music for 40, 50 years, that's what it's all about. That's what keeps me going." Colleen Nolan brought up his charity work next, and Cliff spoke passionately about the causes close to his heart. "I've been very fortunate in my life, very blessed. And I think when you've been given so much, you have a responsibility to give back. Whether it's children's charities, health causes, whatever it might be, we all need to do our part." The conversation flowed naturally. Everyone was relaxed. The audience was engaged. It seemed like it was going to be a lovely interview, but then something shifted in the air. Denise Welch, who had been relatively quiet up to that point, shuffled some papers in front of her. The warmth drained from her face, replaced by something harder, more confrontational. She looked directly at Cliff with an intensity that made everyone uncomfortable. "Cliff," she began, her voice taking on a sharp edge, "I think we need to address the elephant in the room." Cliff's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" Denise didn't hesitate. "Your legal troubles from a few years back, the investigation. Don't you think you owe the public an explanation about all of that?" The studio fell silent. The audience stopped their chatter. The other panelists exchanged quick, uncertain glances. Cliff's face went pale, and he sat up straighter in his chair. "Denise, I was completely exonerated," Cliff said firmly, his voice steady despite the obvious shock. "There were no charges. Nothing. I was cleared entirely." Denise waved her hand dismissively, as if brushing away his words like they meant nothing. "Yes, but where there's smoke, there's fire, isn't there? People still have questions." Kay Adams jumped in quickly, trying to redirect. "Denise, I'm not sure this is." But Denise cut her off. "No, Kay, these are things people want to know. We can't just ignore difficult topics because they make us uncomfortable." Cliff leaned forward, his legendary composure beginning to crack. "This isn't about discomfort, Denise. This is about respect. I came here to talk about my music, my tour. I didn't come here to be ambushed about something that was thoroughly investigated and found to be completely without merit." Denise laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. It was mocking, dismissive. "Oh, come on, Cliff. You're a public figure. Surely you expected questions." "I expected professionalism," Cliff shot back, his voice rising slightly. "I expected basic human decency. What I didn't expect was to be treated like a criminal when I've done absolutely nothing wrong," Janet Street Porter tried to interject. "Perhaps we should move on to—" Denise talked right over her. I'm just saying what everyone is thinking. The public has a right to know. Cliff's hands gripped the edge of the desk. The public does know. Everything was made public. I was investigated, my home was raided, my privacy was violated in the most horrific way, and then I was completely cleared. Completely. Do you understand what that means? It means I did nothing wrong. Denise leaned back in her chair with an expression of false innocence. I'm just asking questions, Cliff. No need to get so defensive. Defensive? Cliff's voice cracked with emotion now. You ambush me on live television, dredge up the worst period of my life, a time when I was publicly humiliated despite being innocent, and you expect me not to be defensive? The audience was dead silent. Some people looked shocked, others uncomfortable. A few were shaking their heads at Denise. Colleen. Nolan reached over and touched Cliff's arm gently. Cliff, we're sorry. This wasn't supposed to. But Denise interrupted again, her voice dripping with condescension. Oh, don't apologize for me, Colleen. I'm not sorry for doing my job. Cliff turned to face Denise directly, and there was fire in his eyes now. Your job? Your job is to humiliate guests? Your job is to make wild insinuations about innocent people? Denise shrugged, that infuriating smirk still on her face. My job is to ask the tough questions that others won't ask. Tough questions? Cliff repeated, his voice incredulous. You're not asking tough questions. You're making accusations disguised as questions. There's a difference, Denise, and if you can't see that, then you have no business sitting in that chair. The other panelists looked stunned. Kay Adams tried once more to intervene. Let's all just take a breath here. Denise ignored her completely. I think you're overreacting, Cliff. I'm simply bringing up matters of public interest. Public interest? Cliff's voice grew stronger. Or are you just interested in creating a spectacle? Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you care more about controversy than you do about the truth. Denise's smile faded. That's not true, isn't it? Cliff challenged. You had plenty of things you could have asked me. You could have asked about my music, my influences, my upcoming projects. But instead, you chose to go straight for the jugular. You chose to bring up the single most painful experience of my life. And you did it with a smile on your face, the audience murmured in agreement. Janet Street Porter leaned forward. Cliff has a point, Denise. Denise turned on Janet. Not you two. Yes, me too, Janet said firmly. This was supposed to be a light entertainment show, not an interrogation. Cliff nodded gratefully at Janet before turning back to Denise. Do you have any idea what it was like? Do you have any idea what it feels like to wake up one morning and have your entire world turned upside down? To have police raid your home while helicopters circle overhead broadcasting it live? To have your name dragged through the mud before anyone even asked if the accusations were true? Denise shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. I didn't think so, Cliff continued, his voice thick with emotion. Because if you did, if you had even the slightest understanding of what that was like, you would never, ever have asked me about it the way you just did. Colleen reached for Cliff's hand. We understand, Cliff. We really do. Do you? Cliff looked at all of them. Because I'm not sure anyone who hasn't been through it can truly understand. The fear, the humiliation, the feeling that your entire life, everything you've worked for, everything you've built, could be destroyed by lies. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Cliff's voice softened, but the pain in it was unmistakable. And then, after months of investigation, after every aspect of your life has been examined under a microscope, you're cleared. Completely cleared. No charges, no case, nothing. Because there was nothing to find. He looked directly at Denise, and you would think that would be the end of it. You would think that people would accept the truth and move on. But they don't. People like you don't. You keep bringing it up. You keep asking questions that have already been answered. You keep acting like there's still some doubt, some question mark, when there isn't. And every time you do that, every time you bring it up, you're causing more damage. You're perpetuating the lie. Denise finally found her voice again. I'm just reflecting what some people think. Some people? Cliff's voice rose. Some people thought the earth was flat. Some people thought witches were real. Just because some people think something doesn't make it worth discussing, especially when the facts clearly show otherwise. Kay Adams nodded slowly. He's right, Denise. Denise looked frustrated. So we're just supposed to ignore controversial topics? Controversial? Cliff stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. No, you're not. You're bringing up a nightmare that nearly destroyed me. You're bringing up false accusations that were proven to be false. And you're doing it with this smug attitude like you're some kind of crusading journalist, when really, you're just being cruel. Denise stood up too, matching his intensity. How dare you call me cruel? I'm doing what any responsible broadcaster would do. Responsible? Cliff's voice echoed through the studio. Responsible would be respecting someone's innocence. Responsible would be acknowledging that I was cleared of any wrongdoing. Responsible would be not treating a guest like a suspect in your personal courtroom. Janet Street Porter finally found her voice. Denise, maybe we should. Denise spun on her. Stay out of this, Janet. Cliff shook his head in disbelief. This is unbelievable. I've been in this industry for over 60 years. I've done hundreds of interviews, thousands, and I have never been treated with such disrespect and such blatant disregard for the truth. Denise crossed her arms. The truth? The truth is that you were investigated and cleared. Cliff's voice boomed now. Why do you keep ignoring that part? Why do you keep pretending that being investigated is the same as being guilty? Do you not understand how dangerous that is? Do you not understand what you're doing? He took a step closer to the desk, his hands gripping the edge. You're destroying the presumption of innocence. You're telling everyone watching that it doesn't matter if you're cleared, it doesn't matter if you're proven innocent, because the accusation alone is enough. The investigation alone is enough, and that is terrifying. That is absolutely terrifying. The studio audience began murmuring. Some people were calling out in support of Cliff. Others were telling Denise to apologize. The energy in the room had completely shifted. Denise raised her voice over the noise. I think you need to calm down, Cliff. That was apparently the final straw. Cliff's face went red, and he pointed a finger at Denise. Don't you dare tell me to calm down. Don't you dare. You invite me onto your show under false pretenses. You attack my character. You dismiss my pain and my innocence. And then you have the audacity, the sheer audacity, to tell me to calm down? Colleen Nolan was on her feet now too. Denise, this has gone too far. Denise whirled on Colleen. Oh, so now you're all turning on me? Kay Adams stood as well, her voice firm. We're not turning on you, Denise, but this is not okay. This is not how we treat guests. Denise's face flushed with anger. I'm not going to apologize for doing real journalism. Cliff let out a bitter laugh. Real journalism? Is that what you call this? Real journalism involves facts, balance, fairness. This is nothing more than a televised attack. Denise stepped closer to Cliff, her voice venomous now. You know what I think? I think you can't handle being questioned. I think you're used to everyone treating you like royalty, and the moment someone asks you something difficult, you fall apart. The audience gasped. Several people booed. Cliff's jaw clenched. I can handle being questioned, Denise. What I can't handle is being treated like a criminal when I've done nothing wrong. What I can't handle is someone like you using your platform to spread doubt and innuendo about an innocent person. Denise laughed mockingly. Someone like me? What does that mean? It means someone who cares more about creating drama than about the truth, Cliff said, his voice cutting. It means someone who thinks being provocative is the same as being brave. It means someone who has clearly forgotten what integrity means. Denise's eyes flashed with rage. How dare you question my integrity? How dare you question my innocence? Cliff fired back immediately. I was cleared, Denise, completely and utterly cleared. And yet here you are, on national television, trying to paint me as suspicious, as questionable, as someone who has something to hide. I have nothing to hide. Nothing. Janet Street Porter tried again. Everyone, please, let's just... But neither Cliff nor Denise was listening anymore. Denise's voice rose to a shout. You're being ridiculous. I asked you a simple question. It wasn't a simple question, Cliff shouted back. It was a loaded question designed to make me look bad no matter how I answered it, and you know it. Colleen Nolan moved between them, holding up her hands. Stop. Both of you, just stop. Denise pointed at Cliff over Colleen's shoulder. He's the one who started yelling. Cliff's voice was hoarse with emotion now. I started yelling? You started this entire thing by ambushing me with accusations about a case that was closed years ago, a case where I was found to be completely innocent. Denise wouldn't let it go. The case may be closed, but people still have questions. Then those people are wrong, Cliff said forcefully. And you enabling their suspicions, you feeding into their doubts, makes you complicit in the damage that was done to me. Do you understand that? You're perpetuating a lie. Denise threw her hands up. I'm not perpetuating anything. I'm just asking questions. You keep saying that, Cliff said, his voice breaking now. But questions can be weapons, Denise. Questions can destroy lives. And when you ask questions that have already been answered, when you ask questions designed to cast doubt on someone's innocence, you're not being a journalist. You're being cruel. The emotion in Cliff's voice was palpable now. His eyes were glistening with tears, and his hands were shaking. Kay Adams moved closer to him, her voice gentle. Cliff, we're so sorry. This shouldn't have happened. Cliff wiped at his eyes quickly. I came here in good faith. I came here to share my music, to connect with the audience, to have a nice conversation. Instead, I've been put through this trial, this public shaming for something I didn't do. Denise scoffed. You're being overly dramatic. That comment sent a ripple of anger through the other panelists and the audience. People started shouting at Denise now, telling her to apologize, calling her out of line. Cliff stared at Denise with a mixture of hurt and anger. Overly dramatic? You have no idea what I went through. You have no idea what it's like to be accused of something so terrible, to have your reputation destroyed, to have cameras outside your home, to have every aspect of your life examined and judged. And then, after being completely cleared, to have people like you bring it up again and again as if the truth doesn't matter. His voice broke slightly. Do you know what it's like to lose your sense of safety? To lose your privacy? To lose your faith in justice? I was innocent, Denise. Innocent. But for months, I was treated like I was guilty. And even after I was cleared, even after every single allegation was proven false, the stain remained. And people like you keep refreshing that stain. You keep reminding everyone of the accusation while conveniently forgetting to emphasize the innocence. The audience was completely with Cliff now, many nodding their heads, some wiping tears from their eyes. Denise's voice was defensive now. I was just doing my job. Your job is to entertain and inform, Cliff said, his voice quieter but no less intense. Not to attack and demean, not to make your guests feel like they're on trial. Janet Street Porter finally managed to get a word in. Denise, I think you need to apologize. Denise spun on Janet. I'm not apologizing for anything. The audience erupted in boos and shouts. The atmosphere in the studio was toxic now, with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. The other panelists looked mortified at what was unfolding before them. Colleen Nolan's voice was stern. Denise, you've crossed a line. Denise looked around at her fellow panelists, at the angry audience, at Cliff's tear-stained face, and for a brief moment, something flickered in her expression. Uncertainty, perhaps, or maybe a hint of regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. You're all being ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong. Cliff let out a long breath and shook his head slowly. If you truly believe that, Denise, then you're even more lost than I thought. He started to remove his microphone, his hands fumbling with the clip. Kay Adams reached out to him. Cliff, please don't go. We can continue without. But Cliff was already moving. I'm sorry, Kay. I'm sorry to you, Janet, and Colleen. You've been nothing but kind. But I cannot stay here. I cannot sit here and be treated like this. Denise finally showed a flicker of concern. Oh, come on, Cliff. Don't be so sensitive. That comment was the final nail in the coffin. Cliff turned to face Denise one last time, and when he spoke, his voice was calm but filled with steel. Sensitive? I'm not being sensitive, Denise. I'm being self-respecting. Something you clearly wouldn't understand. He finished removing his microphone and handed it to a producer who had rushed onto the set. The audience was on their feet now, many of them applauding Cliff, some shouting angry words at Denise. Denise tried to regain control. This is absurd. Everyone, sit down. But no one was listening to her anymore. Cliff looked out at the audience and managed a small, sad smile. Thank you all for your support. I'm sorry you had to witness this. The applause grew louder. He turned to leave the set, walking with as much dignity as he could muster. Denise called after him. Where are you going? We're in the middle of a show. Cliff didn't turn around. I'm leaving. I won't be disrespected like this. A producer rushed up to him as he reached the edge of the set, speaking urgently in his ear. Cliff shook his head firmly. No, I'm done. I'm leaving. Denise's voice grew shrill. You can't just walk off the set. Cliff stopped and turned back one final time. Watch me. And with that, he walked off the stage to thunderous applause from the audience. The camera stayed on the panel, where Denise sat with her arms crossed, looking defiant but clearly rattled. Janet, Colleen, and Kay looked shell-shocked and deeply embarrassed by what had just unfolded. Kay tried to speak to the camera, her voice uncertain. We'll take a quick break." But Denise cut her off sharply. "No, we won't. We're going to continue the show." Janet turned on her, her voice sharp. "Denise, that was completely out of order." Denise's face reddened. "Don't lecture me, Janet." Colleen shook her head in disbelief. "You ambushed him. That was a complete ambush." Denise slammed her hand on the desk, making everyone jump. "I was doing my job." The audience was still in uproar, many of them furious at what they had witnessed. Kay looked at the camera desperately. "We really do need to take a break now." Janet refused to stay silent any longer. "Denise, you need to hear this. What you did was wrong, plain and simple." Denise's eyes blazed. "How was it wrong?" I asked legitimate questions. "Legitimate?" Colleen's voice rose. "You brought up something that was settled, something that caused this man immense pain, and you did it without any warning. That's not journalism. That's cruelty." Denise stood up again, her chair scraping backward. "I refuse to be lectured by you lot. I was trying to have a real conversation, not some fluffy, meaningless chat about albums and tours." Kay Adams shook her head slowly. "There's a difference between real conversation and character assassination. Denise, you crossed that line today." "Character assassination?" Denise's voice was shrill now. "That's ridiculous. I simply asked about something that was in the news." Janet leaned forward, her face stern. "It was in the news years ago, Denise, and the conclusion was clear. He was innocent. You chose to ignore that and bring it up anyway." Denise pointed toward the exit, where Cliff had left. "If he had nothing to hide, why did he storm off?" The audience booed loudly at that comment. Colleen's jaw dropped. "Are you serious right now? He left because you were attacking him, because you refused to acknowledge his innocence, because you treated him with complete disrespect." Denise folded her arms defensively. "I treated him like any other guest." "No, you didn't," Kay said firmly. "You treated him like a suspect. You treated him like someone who owed you an explanation for something he'd already been cleared of. That's not how we do things here." The audience erupted in applause at Kay's words. Denise looked around, clearly realizing she was outnumbered. "So you're all against me now?" Janet's voice was tired. "We're not against you, Denise. We're against what you did. There's a difference." "I stand by what I did," Denise said stubbornly. "Someone had to ask the hard questions." Colleen stood up, her voice filled with emotion. "Hard questions? Denise, there was nothing hard about what you did. It was easy. It was cheap. You took a man's pain, a man's trauma, and you used it for drama, for ratings, for controversy. And you did it without any regard for how it would affect him." Denise's face went pale, but she kept her defiant stance. "That's not fair." "What's not fair," Kay said quietly, "is what you did to Cliff. He came here trusting us. He came here expecting a professional environment. And you betrayed that trust." The audience was still buzzing, conversations breaking out all over the studio. Some people were calling for Denise to be removed from the show. Others were demanding an apology. Janet looked directly at Denise. "You need to apologize, not just to Cliff, but to everyone watching. This was wrong, and you know it." Denise's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out at first. Finally, she managed to speak, her voice defensive. "I'm not going to apologize for doing my job." "Then maybe," Colleen said slowly, "you need to reconsider what you think your job is, because this isn't it." The silence that followed was deafening. Denise looked at each of her co-hosts in turn, seeing nothing but disappointment and anger in their faces. She looked out at the audience, seeing the same thing reflected back at her. For a moment, it seemed like she might actually back down, might actually acknowledge what she'd done, but then her jaw set, and she shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "No, I'm not going to apologize. I asked questions that needed to be asked." Kay Adams closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "Denise, please, just this once, admit you were wrong." But Denise wouldn't budge. "I wasn't wrong." The audience's reaction was immediate and loud. Boos and shouts filled the studio. Some people were standing, pointing at Denise, their faces red with anger. Janet looked at the camera. "I think we really do need to take that break now." "I agree," Colleen added quickly. Denise started to protest, but Kay spoke over her. "We're taking a break, now." As the cameras finally cut away, the damage was complete. The moment had been captured, broadcast, and would live forever. A moment when a beloved entertainer stood up for himself against an unjust attack. A moment when basic decency and respect were thrown aside in favor of controversy and drama. A moment when Cliff Richard showed the world what true dignity looked like, even in the face of such hostility. And a moment when Denise Welch revealed that sometimes asking questions isn't about seeking truth. Sometimes it's about creating pain. And on that day, in that studio, pain was all she managed to create.